and they received it, and we explained the matters raised. The county's position is that the allegations are not true. The financial capacity requirements and the NCA registration requirements contained in tender as listed were based on the nature, scope, complexity, and risk associated with the procurement and were included in the tender document to ensure that only qualified and capable bidders participated in the process. Section 74 of Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015 requires tender documents clearly specify the evaluation criteria and methodology to be applied in the procurement process. Further, Section 82 of the Act provides the evaluation and comparison of tenders shall be undertaken using the procedures and criteria set out in the tender documents. The evaluation committee applied the criteria uniformly and consistently to all bidders as contained in the tender document. The requirement for NCA registration was included to ensure compliance with the applicable legal and regulatory framework governing construction works and was not intended to discriminate against any bidder. It's a requirement that we always have. The county therefore maintains that the procurement process was conducted in accordance with the law, the tender document, and the principles of fairness, transparency, and competitiveness. Appendix 7, 1, and 3. Tender number NCC, that is Environment, ONT 006, 2025-2026, alleged mutilation of the standard tender document. Response, again, the county government's response is that the allegation is not true. This tender was for solid waste collection, transportation, and disposal services in the Embakasi South constituency in Nairobi, sub-county. Section 71 of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015 requires a procuring entity to prepare tender documents that set out clear and complete information relating to the procurement requirements. Further, Section 74 of the Act provides that the tender document shall clearly specify the evaluation criteria and methodology to be applied in the procurement process. Chair, the tender document was uploaded and made available to all prospective bidders through the PPIP portal, thereby ensuring equal access to information and transparency in the procurement process. Any adjustments or customization made to the standard tender document, STD, was solely for purposes of aligning the document with the specific nature, scope, and requirements of the procurement, and did not alter the mandatory provisions of the law or compromise the principles of fairness, transparency, and competitiveness, or expressly contained in the tender document, that is quantifiable, objective, and applied uniformly to all bidders in accordance with the law and established procurement procedures. Upon noting the observations raised by the authority, the county took corrective measures by terminating the procurement proceedings as communicated through letter dated 1st December 2025, and that appendix is attached. The procurement was therefore thereafter retendered using the appropriate standard tender document in compliance with the applicable legal and regulatory framework. The tender document was uploaded on the PPIP portal to ensure transparency and equal access to all prospective bidders. Regarding the allegation of skewed evaluation criteria, the county's position is that evaluation criteria, as I've said earlier, Chair, are determined by nature, scope, complexity, and requirements of that particular procurement. Different tenders may therefore have different evaluation criteria, depending on the procurement objectives and technical requirements. There is no uniform prescribed evaluation criterion applicable to all tenders. Section 68.4 of the PPAD 2015 provides that no tender shall be evaluated using evaluation criteria other than the criteria set out in the tender documents. Further, Section 82 of the Act, which I have stated before, says that the evaluation and comparison shall be done using the procedures and criteria set out in the tender documents. Accordingly, the evaluation criteria applied were those expressly provided in the tender document and were applied uniformly throughout the tender process, the evaluation process. The sixth tender number NCC FIN Econ T052 2024-25. Document used did not adhere to provisions of the omitted the requirement for the capacity building levy as provided under the circular, the said circular. The county acknowledges that this omission occurred in the original tender advertisement. However, upon review, the county took corrective action by terminating the tender to ensure full compliance with the provisions of Circular Number 1, 2024, and to uphold the principles of transparency, fairness, and accountability in the procurement process. The county therefore maintains that while the oversight was regrettable, it was duly rectified through termination of the tender, thereby aligning the procurement process with the requirements of Circular 1 of 2024. And the evidence is in Appendix 10, Chair. The next one, tender as listed, BHO, lack of clarity on technical evaluation criteria and non-remittance technical evaluation criteria during the tender process. With regard to the point of payment to the supplier or contractor, accordingly the levy would be remitted upon payment to the contractor. Appendix 12. The ninth one is a tender Chair, this was a tender concerning the supply, delivery, and repair of oxygen supply line at Pumwani Maternity Hospital. Tender NCC as listed, bidders were given 5 days tender notice and use of brand names when selecting equipment contrary to the law. The response, procedural subcontracting, there was no instance of unauthorized or procedural subcontracting arising from this procurement process. All bids were evaluated and awarded strictly based on the terms and conditions set out in the tender document in accordance to the law and regulations. The procurement records, including the tender documents and evaluation reports, have been duly uploaded on the PPIP for transparency and audit verification, Appendix 15. The next one, tender WDF, contradictory requirement on tender security in the tender invitation, notice and lack of performance security for tender above 5 million. The response, Chair, this tender was for construction of St. Joseph Catholic Road, joining Kabiro Ward in Dagoretti. These anomalies, corrective action was taken in accordance with the PPAD and regulations. The procurement process was therefore terminated to uphold compliance, fairness, and integrity in public procurement. The termination was properly documented and approved, and the relevant records are attached in Appendix 16. Now, those are the issues on B. You can move to C, which is about non-compliant complaints and management directives and responses to PPRA. The first one is NCC Hospital. The county wrote to PPRA seeking for details of the complaint. I've not seen the response from PPRA on this one. That's 2018. 2023-2024 WDP, tender for construction of the Greenfield Road in Upper Savannah. That's in Embakasi East constituency. The complaint was received by the county and the response was submitted to the complainant. The next one was a tender for construction of Legio Maria Road in Lindy Ward, that is in Kibra constituency. That was phase 1 of the project. D, failed to upload all procurement records, initiated procurement without prior planning. Some procurements were initiated without user requisition. Opening and evaluation of tenders was done without appointment letters. Professional opinion not prepared by HOP. Contract awards are not approved by accounting officer, and successful bidders were not notified, and BOI not submitted by successful bidders in relation to contract. So there's a list of the ones where there is that complaint. And the committee raised observations in relation to the following. The first one in health, wellness, and nutrition. That was the construction of a perimeter wall at Zimmerman Pickens Dispensary. It was processed in accordance with the provisions of the law and regulations. The procurement process is our position that it followed the applicable statutory procedures, and the relevant procurement documentation was duly prepared, reviewed, and maintained as part of the procurement record in compliance with established procurement requirements. In line with the transparency and accountability obligations, the complete procurement records for the said tender have been uploaded on the PPIP for audit and verification purposes. Where the system did not provide for uploading certain documents, the same are hereby attached. That is Appendix 17. The answer is the same for the next one. That was Biafra Dispensary here in Kamkunji. The procurement process followed the applicable procedures and relevant documentation. In line with the transparent, the response is just the same as one I've read, Chair. Do I go through it?
Please do.
Yes, okay. In line with transparency and accountability obligations, the complete procurement records for the said tender have been uploaded on the Public Procurement Information Portal, PPIP, for audit and verification purposes. Where the system did not provide for uploading certain documents, the same are hereby attached. Appendix 18. Tender number NCC PSM T104 2023-2024. Response: the county government of Nairobi confirms that tender, as read, which was for the provision of insurance services for group personal accident insurance (GPA), work injury benefits (WIBA), and employer liability services for Nairobi City County government staff, was processed in accordance with the provisions of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015 and the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Regulations 2020. The procurement process followed the applicable statutory procedures, and the relevant procurement documentation was duly prepared, reviewed, and maintained as part of the procurement.